And again, I know, we're going through a lot of transitional stuff from a community standpoint, and obviously from a work and social standpoint. So appreciate everybody taking the time to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is data analytics around Power BI. And let me go ahead and crank this thing up real quick and tell you a little bit about kind of what, well, if I can get it presented the right way. Hang on 1 second. Let's get this aligned the right way. Slideshow. We got distracted by restaurants in Sioux Falls, so. Let's do a different screen here. There we go. All right. And so just wanted to share some details around myself and how we can, if you have any questions or follow-up items from today's discussion, want to keep it fairly, interactive, obviously, because if you have some questions. So a little bit about me. I've been doing technology work, management consulting, technology consulting for various organizations now for about 30 years. And so I've seen and done a lot. I landed into the data analytics space, data warehousing, business intelligence, mostly in the Microsoft platform. So I know pretty much everything from, SQL Server, 2005 forward, all aspects, everything about the cloud. I was there, actually worked at Microsoft when Power BI got off the ground, did some work there, hence why the BI Dan Monkeyer came in place, because there's lots of Dan Evanses out there and we had to differentiate ourselves from each other. Create somewhat of a following, have a couple of Twitter handles. The Dan the BI Man, unfortunately for some reason got blocked. I don't know why, but so I'm transitioning to the Old Man BI because I've been doing it for a while. And obviously I don't do a lot of Facebook, but if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you can kind of see and hopefully help promote some of the capabilities that we're doing out there and leveraging it within the context of what's out there from kind of a digital transformation slash return to work type aspect. So my hope today is to kind of give you a brief overview of what is in Power BI, how it fits within the overall Microsoft ecosystem, give you a brief overview about what that is, and then kind of go into some of the AI specific examples that are there and maybe help answer questions. I don't expect this to take the whole 2 hours, but I'm happy to stick around to share thoughts and ideas about any specific issue you have and ways we can stay connected. So let's kind of move from there. If I got this set up right. So can you see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. And so I just want to do a brief overview. I mean, if I could just have a quick verbal show of hands, who's actually worked with Power BI in the past? Say yay if you've actually worked with it before.
Very minimally.
Minimally, okay. That's one.
I was actually trying to load it on my other system while we're doing it. So if you're doing a demo, I thought, oh, maybe I'll try to learn a little more.
There you go. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to paint. It's just I don't want to assume anything. So I'll start from the bottom and work my way up from there.
2 other people on the call have worked with it on a daily basis.
Okay, all right, that's fair. That's fair. All right, so I'll just kind of keep it at a moderate pace, and I can stop and feel free to interrupt and ask questions. But I just want to give you a quick, what they call it, a brief history of time around Power BI, since I've been there since the beginning. and kind of some things that are unique to the solution as compared to other tools you might be using, including Excel, and then pivot a little hard into some of the advanced techniques and things that you may not be aware of or heard about and don't know how they can apply. And I'm definitely someone who likes to let people experiment on their own time and give you some resources you can explore on your own, or at least give you some ideas to leverage, or at least reach out to connect. In essence, a lot of the AI infused capabilities around Power BI are tied to obviously not just the data, but also the visuals itself. And so we'll talk briefly about some of the capabilities with what they call Q&A, questions and answers within Power BI, some key influencers, decomposition trees or decom trees, and then this new thing called smart narratives, which is interesting. And I'll show some examples and I'll give you some references for it. So hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. But I'll go ahead and start out. Are there any specific questions that folks would like to hear more about before we continue? All right. So let's step back a little bit. And, in full disclosure, I spent probably a good 5 years at Microsoft and spent the rest of the time as a consultant or a technician or a delivery professional. And so when we talk about Power Platform, in essence, when you research and understand these things, it's really designed to be a low-code system developer platform that allows you to leverage capabilities around Microsoft tools across the board. So it's not really a point solution. It has references within tools you probably use in a day like Office and Azure and Dynamics. I'm not going to get into the aspects about how these two relate to each other, but happy to talk about how they are related. But Power BI is the business analytics piece of it. Think of it as the reporting or self-service solution. And then all these other components help augment the work that you built from there. So has anybody worked within Power Apps or Power Automate or virtual agents at all? I would think no. Okay. So just know that once you start working within the Power Platform, which Power BI is a part of, you have access to a lot of these other components so that you can build self-service applications. I know there's a lot of talk about, say, return to work capabilities and how you can basically, verify or schedule how people want to return to work, how long they stay there, how you can manage the workflow. Those things are great. Power Automate, which to me is a very underestimated tool. Think of it as process automation. For those that know what RPA means, there's some great solutions and tools out there that you can use to quickly develop and extend. And the virtual agents are basically, in essence, bots that you can build without a lot of development and programming. And the key theme for this point is that all these components actually work with each other, and there's no wrong place to start. You can start with any of them. And they all have shared components below, data connectors, AI builder components, access to various different portals and solutions. And then actually this DataFlex thing has changed recently. It's called the Dataverse, which I think there may be some trademark questions with Marvel about how that works. But in essence, it's shared models across the solutions allow for you to actually bring your data into the cloud, align it to common business models, and leverage that, for your constituents either in the business or your clients to actually provide access to information and data in different ways. And so when you hear the term Power Platform, it's a pretty big topic. And so I just wanted to let you know that Power BI is a component of it. And if you want to know more about the Power Platform tools and capabilities, we can definitely drill into that. And there's been some updates. The logos have probably changed a good bit over the last couple of months, probably late 2020. They were revised to provide some more consistency, and you've probably seen this across the board with a lot of the Microsoft tool set. And so as you look at content, just know that they're kind of rebranding things going into early this year. And I'll mention some resources here towards the end, but where you can find more about where the patterns are related to new features and capabilities and how the Power Platform is being integrated going forward. And so when you see some of these newer logos, just know that they're somewhat related to this approach and are referencing the same tools. And that branding continues. If anyone's working with Power BI and they've recently done some updates with the Power BI report server or the paginated reports capability, you'll see some of that new branding that's starting to surface as well. All right, so step back a little bit and talk about, where business intelligence has progressed, because it's been around for a while. And I'll kind of build out these slides so we can kind of see where Power BI sits within this evolution landscape. Initially, back as probably early as the 1970s, you had the first initial concepts around business intelligence that required, heavy IT skills. And, to build a report, and print it out in green bar on a dot matrix printer took, obviously, skills and acumen, and took time that honestly, by the time things got produced, it was a matter of, months, if not longer, to produce those. And so the coordination as far as business agility wasn't really there until the second wave, where we had the advent of the internet. We had different types of information systems that came into place that are providing not just back-end data sets, but also information coming in from different types of formats to do analysis. And so the responsibility kind of spread, but the timing spread. And so as we're getting into this third wave, in essence, this is where we had the advent of, various forms of information where skills to do the analysis aren't necessarily embedded to technical experts. Everybody's accessing this through different mediums. It's not just, data centers or even, desktops. You have laptop surfaces, what have you. And I would argue that we're on the cusp of a fourth wave, which is more, AI infused or assisted type of analysis. So because since everything is generating data, you have everything from televisions to dishwashers to cars and all kinds of devices that are generating data. How do you do that analysis in a way that you're not actually overwhelmed to make intelligent decisions? So these tools have been developed to help support this progression, and I'm excited to kind of see some of the new capabilities that are available. So when we talk about Power BI, when we kind of build this out, and so going all the way back to 2015, which may seem like a generation ago, Microsoft really didn't have a great solution from an end-to-end business intelligence progression. I mean, they had some functionality within SharePoint. They had acquired companies like Proclarity to provide endpoint stuff. SharePoint was the main delivery mechanism. And so when this was built from the ground up as a software as a service, it was really designed, in essence, in that third wave mindset, which it would ingest pretty much any kind of data, no matter where it resided, present it in a form that anybody can consume it, regardless of what platform they're on, including non-Microsoft platforms, and then assistance to actually do that analysis in the tools that people are comfortable with. And we'll talk a little bit about how that level of integration is not just persistent within the Microsoft stack, but also how it can be extended to support your existing solutions as well. For those that really haven't taken the opportunity to do some reading, if I could recommend a book, it's a couple of years old now, but it's called Hit Refresh, that Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, published several years ago, that kind of sets the framework about, how a lot of this stuff can be enabled. And it's actually a good way to kind of see the insight about where Microsoft is heading as an organization from a directional standpoint, because it's a pretty strong pivot from that perspective. And the whole concept around data culture is really important to take away from this. So when we talk about Power BI, I know a lot of folks have other tools, including other Microsoft products like Excel, and if they're thinking about making a change, why? And I'm very much an advocate of, if you don't need to change, then you don't need to unless there's need. Power BI gives you a lot of flexibility and solutions beyond, what you can see in standard tool sets. One thing that helps out a lot is that Power BI Desktop, which is one of the authoring tools, is actually free to use for individual use, which is great to get started, to understand what you can do and use that as the basis to make, informed decisions for yourself and potentially your organization. It also has integration with other capabilities to allow for you to actually support things like real-time dashboards and interactive reports and scorecards that can be used within the service or attached to your own kind of either Azure-based or even technology-based solutions. We'll drill into some of the natural language and AI insight functionality here soon. But if you don't like what's out of the box, it's a platform. I mean, one thing a lot of folks don't realize is that you can actually customize Power BI to do whatever you want to do and make it part of your existing solutions. So if you need to actually provide some advanced analysis capabilities within something you're actually building, you can just reference it. And you can actually build to not just what content you want to show, but also any particular data set that you want to surface. And then last but not least, the kind of the first class citizen capability of Power BI with other Microsoft tool sets, especially if you're an Office 365 user, and definitely if you're a Dynamics 365 user, that integration level is pretty much transparent. And then, Teams, for those that have been working here recently, has become, basically a lifeline to a lot of the work that we're doing. And that level of integration is pretty amazing to help with that level of collaboration. So, continue to keep leveraging those tool sets. And if you're not quite there yet and looking for a solution, it's definitely something to consider. So while I'm here, let me switch screens here for a second and where's my Zoom? Trying to figure out which screen I'm sharing right now. So do you see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. So a couple updates. So again, I don't do a lot of Facebook stuff, but on LinkedIn, if you're curious what I look like, this is me. So I've been doing a lot of work in the space and stuff. Happy to connect with anybody who's interested in continuing the discussion. So feel free to reach out. I'm actually based in West Tennessee, a little town called Memphis, for those that know the area. Not quite as cold as it is up there, but it's going to get kind of chilly here in a few days. So definitely appreciate what everybody's going through. So let's talk about a little bit of what this Power BI thing is. So if we go to powerbi.com, you actually have the ability to actually start using this today if you haven't. And so the first thing that you'll notice is that you have a couple of options on the top. And this one here is to try free. And this will actually get you a personal edition of Power BI that you can use from the standpoint that you can actually use and download the Power BI desktop to kind of build some insights. And then you can actually from there publish and share and develop some rich interactive reports like we'll go into here shortly. And if you're with a larger organization and you already have Office 365, you may actually already have Power BI that is accessible, and I can show you how you can get into it from here. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And show you a couple of things that we can set up as far as related components within Power BI. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And I should have access to Power BI. So this is the enrollment process that you want to use. Don't want to add anybody else. I actually provisioned a new tenant to provide these services. So when you log in for the first time, you'll see something very, very similar to this. And so this is the layout for Power BI. And for those that actually have used, say, Office 365 or other tools, this is where you can kind of tell, how it lines up with other capabilities. Again, it may be different based upon what types of features that you have set up in the organization. But Power BI is kind of, somewhere between OneNote and PowerPoint. But if you want to explore some of this in the future, or if you have the ability, you can actually request access to these tools to use on a regular basis. So here in Power BI, I have a couple of things that I can use as far as developing and sharing content. The one thing I want to kind of draw your attention to is over here on the right, you have this little download arrow, which gives you the ability to actually get access to some additional enhancements or plugins or additional tools to develop an enterprise adoption solution. Not necessarily going to get into all of these, but have you talk about what they're for. But the main thing I want to showcase is that once you kind of sign up for the free license, you can actually go here to Power BI Desktop and actually download that as a feature that you can use to pull into your local development environment. And again, it kind of popped up here. For those that have Windows 10, it's going to want you to actually do a Microsoft Store solution. If not, what you can also do, if you go to, say, Microsoft Downloads, there's the clock. You can actually download a solution directly from Microsoft as an application that you've seen before to do some data analysis type work. So either one is fine. I typically prefer the App Store one just because it's constantly updated for me, and I don't have to worry about the solution. It gets updated actually continuously, no less than monthly. And so this actually gets promoted with those updates, and I can show you where you can get some more resources for it as well. And so you can launch the application and you can actually get access to the main interface. And so I'll go ahead and launch Power BI Desktop. Looks like it's coming out over here. So we'll give it a minute to load. Any questions so far? All right. And so let me pull these over real quick. And so the first thing that'll happen, you'll get this dialog that has a lot of helpful resources. I'm going to close that, and then you'll get actually a view that gives you the Power BI Desktop. And so this is your primary interface to actually start doing some data analysis. And they made some recent enhancements to make it a little bit easier to understand, where to start. Because in essence, it's not quite as obvious to kind of, know how to build out solutions. So this new Canvas approach gives you some key examples about how you can get started for doing some data analysis. In essence, you can quickly, click on any of these tiles and pull in information, do some media analysis. Or if you want to, you can go up here to the ribbon at the top, and you can go to Get Data, which is your primary interface to pulling in different types of data sets. So let let me select on this so you can kind of understand the range of different data sets that are available within Power BI. And hopefully it'll come back here in a minute. Oh, looks like it's, there we go. And so what you can do is that, as you can see, and I'll just kind of let you peruse the list, you can connect to static file sets. You can actually parse PDF files or files you have loaded locally or within a shared folder set. For those in big data, you can actually do parquet manipulations, all kinds of enterprise database data sets. Some solutions and systems that are provided by third parties. So keep in mind, this is not really designed to work with just Microsoft solutions. You can actually use other components wherever your data resides. Lots of Azure. I've been doing some work recently with this Azure Synapse piece, which is a topic in itself. It's some of the big highly scalable data that you can do some pretty interesting analysis on. Lots of other Azure components, HT Insights or big data solutions, some dynamic solutions. And also what you notice as we go through the list, you'll see some third-party services. So it is friendly to work with those. So if you've done a lot of work with Google Analytics and you want to surface that data, you can do that here. Also, other package solutions that have extensions that you can connect to with. For those of us kind of doing our taxes here in short order, we can actually do some analysis in QuickBooks. And then anything else that's out there, again, this list is updated almost monthly. And we have some default connectors for those that are data scientists. We can actually do some R and Python scripting to bring in some data frames there as well. Traditional OData feeds for basically any other types of data connections. And as we continue to move on, some of these are actually being developed as we go. And I can show you a resource here towards the end where we can actually, see what additional data sources are in development to connect to. And so when I connect to specific data sources, let me pull an example of one that would be a good example. It might be worthwhile to kind of show you a little bit about some of the demo content that I've got set up for today. So let me go into this Power BI Bootcamp. And I have to go into, let me go into a specific link here real quick. Hang on 1 second. Because this is relatively new on what we're trying to accomplish here. So let me grab. One second, I can share this content with everybody later, but my links to my data set. I may have lost it, my map here, just 1 minute. may have to come back to this piece because in essence, it's giving us the context. Oh, so there it is. Apologies. It's here towards the end. And so I had a reference to this older repository for labs. So let's grab this real quick. And again, I'll provide it to you as we go. All right. So this repository was fairly, fairly recent up until a while ago. And we can build some new capabilities around data analysis. But in essence, if I want to access, a specific, content that's out here, I can actually connect to these specific files, who the contributors are about it, and I can view it in raw format. And so here, what I can do, I can connect to, this specific content where I'm looking at basically some structured data in a form where I can have like specific customer IDs and identifiers, and I'll set the context a little bit about what the scenario is. So I can take links like this, and I can copy these directly into my tool set here, and I can use this as kind of like a web access. So if I connect to some web data, I can actually say, I can do some basic advanced components. I should be able to actually paste this in here as a specific data set, and then I'll actually connect to it and pull it in to do some additional analysis, which I'll show in the next phase. And so that's how basically you can actually work with this information directly. And so whether you have databases, whether you have files, whether you have websites, all this makes it pretty easy. So let me set the stage for that in the next section, but I just want to at least give you some basic understanding about how you can access to the Power BI desktop and kind of show how we build out these examples. Let's go back a little bit into some of these new visual concepts and how they relate to the overall solution. So when we talk about AI infused visuals, a couple of them stand out. And again, there's some animations here you can kind of see. One approach is the ability to actually, when you work with data, actually ask questions on the data and have it actually suggest how that information should be presented and how you can manage that approach as well. So it makes it really easy to gain insights without actually having to know how to build a specific visual report. You just ask a question on the data, and it actually will give you a response and kind of guide you through that approach. A lot of these are based on native language translation. Right now, it's based upon English language and other major languages. It's all tied to the desktop service and the desktop and the actual Power BI service itself. So you can actually build content, publish it, and share it with others if you want. And it gives you the ability to extend this into more than just reports, but also dashboards as well. And you can actually build context around the different questions for others to use to kind of navigate that experience. So it includes, not only some basic questions, but it also will allow for you to do some advanced, topic discussion. And so you can do everything from things like not only, what's the total revenue, but you can do some ranking, you can do some sorting, you can do some complex conditional type of questions. You can do some comparison results. All that's supported within the desktop capability today. And it's assisted by a lot of the, supported AI technologies that are available within the overall Microsoft stack. And that's where the shared capabilities come into play to allow for you to to have the need to, once you build something, you can leverage it across multiple different platforms. You don't have to recreate from scratch every time. And it does actually work within a certain set of visuals. And I'll talk a little bit about the different types of visuals and how you can source more of those. But just know that, you know, Q&A is pretty pervasive across all kinds of different visuals. So when you start saying, show me, total results, it may start out as, say, KPI, like a total number, but as you expand the question, it'll go into all kinds of different types of visual capabilities. Other features that kind of help out with it, we kind of saw it in some of the earlier examples. You can do some questions. So again, it's aware of not just the data that it's connected to, but it also is aware of the relationships between the data. So it can actually assist with those questions. It can actually support better questions to answer and give you some cues about how to formulate those questions in a way that gives you the appropriate answers. So it's kind of coaching you throughout the process so that you can start out with initial thought, and then based upon the relative data, it can guide you through that entire process based upon these visual cues between elements that it's detecting within the data and things that it needs some additional assistance with. And so as, kind of a subject matter expert on the tools, and in the data sets themselves, sometimes you need to provide assistance. So what you can do is that to help end users leverage this capability, you can develop not just pre-built questions, but you can provide key terms and context and other types of ways to navigate information to make it easier for your peers or constituents to actually find the insights that they want to. And all that can be built into the solution to help improve the overall data analysis experience. And so some of those things are around, like, actually training the Power BI service based upon the data that you loaded to actually recognize key terms and do some mappings of those to specific outcomes. So if you ask a question about, in this case, revenue and publisher, you can guide the results to a specific, visual that you want to present, that you built or, assembled to help out with that further analysis, or you can allow for it to actually make those suggestions. You can kind of pick and choose the ones that you think that are favorable or not. And then as you ask more and more questions against the data, it kind of builds a pattern and can learn from that. And so as you can kind of see, some things are known and some things are unknown. And so the unknown items, you can actually provide additional context and assistance to help guide, if people are asking questions around terms that aren't recognized in the model, you can point it in the right direction to ensure that it's handling it in the appropriate manner. And then, key terms, everybody talks about at times management around information from a metadata standpoint. What's the common terminology around key terms, and do you want to drive that standardization? And so if people, ask for things in a certain way, you can associate that in the proper perspective to take consideration things like, if you're a global organization, how you ask a question here in the United States may be different from other parts of the world. Then how does that support the further analysis so you can get some consistent results? And so let me kind of assemble that component before we kind of move into some of the other visuals, something that'll help with understanding about how Power BI can support that level of analysis. And so I've kind of pre-built a connection. I can kind of back into this a little bit and show you kind of how this was initially assembled. So when I started out earlier, you kind of noticed that there was some cues for access to information. So if I go up here to some of the recent sources, I can see that I actually have a connection tied to that specific data set on GitHub that I'll provide the link to later on. This connection actually is pulling in to provide the context around what we're doing. We're doing some analysis on basically a help desk scenario. So here we're looking at, in essence, for folks that are calling for support and where they're calling from, what's the number of tickets they're actually registering, what type of support subscription do they actually have registered, what type of role in the organization are they in, how big is the company, what's their name, and what's the rating of the experience they actually had. So all this can actually come in through this level of analysis. And we brought this in and actually did some basic data transformation to kind of get it organized in the way that we want to do some further analysis. And so if I do a refresh on this, which I'm over here, in essence, I'm kind of doing some alignment of the information so I can organize it within, say, a company level, customer level, a support feedback level. So I'm kind of grouping this in a form that makes sense for me to do further analysis, so that when I look at this specific report, I can kind of see that there's ways to do, questions against the information that's ingested within the tool. And so the first thing I can actually do is add some visuals into this to assist my further analysis. So if I go into this insert tab up top, notice I have a couple of options. And so I'm going to focus kind of on this section here in today's session. So if I add this Q&A visual, you notice it kind of builds out a specific set of questions based upon the specific data set. And it's actually asking for me to actually ask some questions. So one thing I can start doing here is say show tickets. And so it'll actually give me a total count of tickets that I have. And so if I want to do this as a count, I can say show total tickets. They can give me a similar view. And notice that it doesn't necessarily recognize this specific term. So it's actually asking for some guidance to say, are these past questions that have been asked, or is this you're trying to attend? So, so if I want to say total tickets by country, it'll provide, I don't recognize country, but there's, within the model, this field called country region. Is that what you mean? And I can click on it, and then I can actually suggest a bar chart. And it's actually mapping the question that I asked to the specific question that it's trying to address. And it's actually giving me, some visualization on that relatively quickly. And so I can see that the UK is actually, has a lot more, questions as far as tickets out here versus Spain. So if I want to see this as a map, instead I can say, as a map, and that'll give me the ability to kind of flavor the visual to actually support that view. So I can actually see the number of tickets that are coming in for specific regions. I can hover over these different items, and I can continue to kind of extend the visualization aspects of this until I'm ready to actually do some customizations to it. And so what I can do is that for now, I'm kind of building the visualization. If I want to convert this into a visual to enhance further, I can click on this, turn it into a standard visual. And then what you'll end up seeing is that over here on the right, the fidelity fills in, and that some of these attributes for building out the visual are populated for me based upon how I ask the specific question. So if I want to, drill into this further and focus on the actual chart and graph, I can do that as well. If I want to add additional levels, I can do that relatively quickly. Besides determining, what type of visual I want to pick for now. If I want to add another question to this as well, notice that it actually, keeps some history of it. And so if I go back to, show tickets by um, by role, I can get a graph chart that shows me that view. And if I want to actually continue to say, you know what, tickets is a term that keeps popping up, how do I map that to the model that allows me to add some additional context? And so I can click on this gear and you can kind of see it says, open up a menu that allows me to actually help inform the solution about how I can develop further questions. Again, this is an enhancement that allows me to provide additional details to clarify. If I have data from different data sets, if I want to establish a common term or a list of synonyms that tickets are the same as issues and issues are the same as requests, that's out there. If I want to actually see the questions that are being asked in the solution and promote some of those questions as popular or trendy, I can do that. I can teach the Q&A model to actually help with the assistance about which visuals are more appropriate based upon the data set, and then even actually promote specific questions that are out there. And so if I look at synonyms, again, these are elements that are extracted from the data set that I pulled in. If some of these don't make sense to actually include in the model, I can exclude those, or if I want to add, additional terms for things like, organization or company, or if I'm looking at for geography, maybe folks are more comfortable with terms like state or county or region, whatever, I can add this into here as well. And so I can augment the data set with synonyms that just assist with the visualizations to help provide a better experience. On the specific questions, let me sign in real quick and see if I have any from earlier. These are the types of questions that are being asked from anybody who's leveraging the same data set. And so what I should see after I sign in is if there are questions that are trending or questions that are happening more frequently, or if there are ones that are more relevant and important, I can actually review those and promote those in a way that they show up to help jumpstart the data analysis approach. And so looks like it's not going to let me do that. So I may have to restart this again. Sorry. There we go. Let's try that again. It looks like it doesn't like my authentication, so. Let's go back to, let's see if I can actually move forward. There we go. All right, so on the Teach Q&A, this one's kind of interesting because here is where you can actually train what type of visuals appear when you ask questions. And so as you know the data set, you can say, show total And so you notice that here it's trying to highlight items that actually recognize as values that we want to summarize, but then there's others that it doesn't recognize because there's not a direct mapping, and it's making recommendations to do that. And so as you're building this out, you notice before when I said by country, it didn't recognize it and it made some other suggestions. And so instead of the result, being something that's non-responsive, I can actually select these. And you notice the context changes. And so in the future, when I actually, ask that type of question, I should get more direct results rather than having to understand what the underlying data is needing. And so I can actually kind of test out, in essence, what are the results that my users are going to get before they actually even go in, so that I know that if they ask something in a certain way, it's not going to give them a response that they don't expect. And so now it should have a direct mapping, to those views, where before it was actually, prompted me to actually select an option. And then the manage terms, here's where you can kind of create a list of other terms for certain elements, so if tickets are basically issues, or if, country region is really area, you can build it out. And then it can actually give you specific questions that you can use over time. It's not going to build it in because it was having an issue to log in, but I can show some of these suggested questions and kind of pin that into the list. And so when I actually go back in and create the new visual, it's going to automatically make that recommendation for me. So if I create a new Q&A, you'll see that it actually has that seeded question in there, so I can go directly to that view if I want to. So hopefully that gives you kind of an understanding about how you can actually kind of customize the Q&A feature to help support the user experience without actually having to know how to build out the specific reports, leveraging the data that you're bringing in. All right, a couple other items, and then I'm going to pause for some questions. So another one is the key influencers visual, which is kind of different than just Q&A. Q&A is kind of free form. This actually does some pre-analysis of the information that you have pulled in, and actually does some categorization for you. And so you don't have to create any relationships or any links between the specific data set. It's just looking for what seems to associate with each other and showing that in a consistent view, and then potentially what things may be outliers in that view that you want to do some further analysis on. So this one is kind of nice to see against basically any data set, because it gives you some trends as far as what is happening with your overall data set. And then, based on certain factors, what might be, skewing that positively or negatively or neutrally, that may not be obvious from a specific, question that you may specifically ask. And then since it has the perspective across the entire data set, it can look at things like, what's the trend of this as far as like, average, results or outcomes to help support that. And so these are actually kind of interesting to work with, because it can give you some insights as far as, where your decisions could be directed towards. And so let's take a look at what that could be. Let me clean up some of this original stuff. I don't want to connect to any data sets here. So like I did before, I can go back to my, when I'm at my home view, I can go back to my insert, and I can actually go and select this key influencer view. And this view is a little bit different in that it's looking for details around specific elements. And so what I can do is that I can start building up a story to say, I want to analyze a specific level. And so let me look at things like my ticket count here. And then what I can actually include onto this is that, is this affected by, say, my subscription type? Is this affected by my role in the organization from the requester? Is it affected by, say, the tenure of that specific person, and then maybe the the company size in itself. And so what I'm doing is a quick analysis to say, based upon, the number of support tickets that were issued, how likely is a specific ticket going to, say, the volume I'm looking at basically increase or decrease? That's kind of the trends that I want to manage. How likely is my incident count with a certain customer going to increase based upon these factors? And so based upon the overall data set, you're more likely, because who the person is in the organization, get more support requests. And in essence, this is by a factor of almost 4 times as much than the size of the organization itself. And then this one here is kind of highlighted because it gives you some descriptors as far as the combinations of the elements itself. And so this is kind of where all these factors kind of blend together to come up with some elements to kind of show that the balance of all of these, the heaviest influencer on this is going to be description type. And as I change these different elements, if I don't really care about necessarily tenure or necessarily the role in organization, I can kind of reduce it into further elements. So I still see that the description level is a key driver, and we can kind of see the trend and breakdown from there. And then if I only want to see the items that are actually influencers on the actual trend, I can select this and kind of filter that out to say, obviously, my premier accounts are going to give me the highest level of incidents to increase. And so if I want to say minimize the amount of incidents, maybe I need to focus on less premier accounts, or if I need to make decisions about allocating staff to help support those incidents, I can see that trend coming. The other thing you can do in this visual too is look at kind of segmentation of the data based upon those influencers. And so if I add a couple other pieces, like let's throw the country region piece in there, I'm more likely to have more incidents based upon a specific country population size than I am in essence based upon the company size itself. And that gives you that correlation relatively easily. And then these markers up here are basically to help confirm. Again, it's basing this on the data that it's seeing. If there's other factors that that might be favoring this in a positive or negative way, you can do this positive or negative ranking. And this says that hey, this analysis is supporting what I'm trying to accomplish. It's giving me what I need, or there's a few more things that I could actually use to help support it. That's feeding back into these AI models that are being driven by the Microsoft platform to help support tailoring this approach for what your needs are. So this is kind of nice to help in study what are the things that are top of mind or bubbling up, or potentially patterns that you're not detecting in the overall data set that are relatively easy to surface. And then as we go into some of the final one, the visuals, then we can open it up for some questions here. This decomposition tree is kind of neat. Been playing around with these now for a couple of years. To me, it's more of a chain of thought decision-making process where, based upon specific data elements, how is stuff broken down, and how can you look at items that kind of correlate to specific values to kind of show what trends are out there, and how you can actually support some informed decisions. This one in particular is nice because it really doesn't require a lot of setup. It actually is aware across different data sets, across dimensions, and does a lot of the auto aggregation. And the build out of the visual is totally AI driven, which in essence, it does the automatic grouping, categorization, and recalculations without you having to do really any of the work. And to me, is like one of the first favorite visuals I go to when people don't really understand what the data is telling them, to help drive those additional insights into things like key influencers or even questions or other more classic visuals. And so how that's set up, honestly, is relatively straightforward as well. I can go into my my insert again, and I have my decomposition tree. And in this case, here, it's kind of the same approach. I want to analyze, in essence, in this case, I want to look at maybe not the number of tickets, but basically kind of the average rating. And so let me figure out where that is. Yeah. So here's my rating. And so let me do this as kind of like an average number. And so here I can actually get into the, oops, I'm sorry, it's my scores, not my rating. So let's look at average. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at my average rating. So my average rating isn't bad. It's on a scale of 1 to 10. But then what are the things that actually could, impact or influence it? So obviously subscriptions could be a factor. So we'll add that into my analysis. Role within the organization could be a factor as well. Maybe location could be a factor. Let's just start out with those and we can explore further. And so these are the different levels I can explain by. And so you notice you have a plus over here. And so I can split my data based upon this average score value. Do I want to navigate, before in the key influencer, I kind of had toggle between high and low. Here I can say, potentially my lowest scoring ratings and things like that, I want to make improvements on. So let's look at the lowest rating breakdown. And so typically Germany gives me a pretty good rating. And again, it's the first in this level. And then France kind of gives us my lowest. Well, let's continue down that path and kind of see, what that breakdown is. It looks like basically the folks who are administrators are giving us the lowest ratings that we need. And if we continue down that path, I can drill down into my subscription type as well. And I can see, in essence, that premier solution is obviously tracking to say, if I want to focus my attention to improve my rating with the least amount of investment, I need to focus on people in France who are administrators in the premier subscriptions. If I want to kind of move it around, I can, so I can reorganize this pretty quickly. And I can kind of group it on country so that if I have contacts in certain regions or people who manage certain subscriptions, I can give them this level of insights. One thing I can also do, I can kind of lock it down. So if I'm responsible for providing this analysis to other users to share in particular reports, I don't have to teach them how to navigate through this. I can always have this starting out at this perspective level. And so when I'm looking at, say, role and organization in Spain, those folks can kind of see this view. And it looks like these administrators seem to be giving us the most grief across different organizations. And I know the UK consumers seem to be the worst offenders here. So this gives you some flexibility in doing this data analysis. And I've seen solutions where they do nothing like this because you're trying to drive into a specific outcome or question. And all the analysis is kind of driven behind the scenes. Didn't have to do really any setup other than pulling the data to make this work. So this one's pretty powerful tool to kind of begin the exploration, and then you can have other visuals to kind of support that analysis. And so if I look at, say, doing a traditional, say, bar chart, looking at specific subscription, say ratings, the original scores, I made the same mistake again. And then, say I want to break it down into my company sizes. I can do this analysis as well. So I can kind of see in the UK, if I filter on this, everything is contextually tied to, it looks like my smaller companies are affecting, this specific rating more so than it does the larger companies. And I can actually do this analysis side by side. So all these have that interactive visualization to allow for me to support informed decisions. All right, and then last but not least, and this is kind of exciting, this is relatively new, the smart narrative. And again, I've got a link for an example in here we can try. This is kind of like an off script view of what we're trying to accomplish here. So let me see if I can actually build this one out appropriately. So in essence, what I can potentially do is if I go into my insert and I actually have my smart narrative, this one actually doesn't work independently. It needs like a visual to actually bind off of. But there's a couple of parameters that you can use to develop off of it. So if I go back to my original chart here and I right click, hopefully I should have this option to summarize. And what this will do is basically take this analysis. So let's test this out. Let's look at this UK one for a second. And let's rearrange it so it actually has some space to build out. And so what should happen is that if I do a right click and I do a summarize, it should give me a smart narrative that basically describes what's happening within the specific graph. And so apparently there's a specific customer in this range that has the highest score and it's an outlier in this particular range. And then, looking at that range, accounts for over half of my original score. And then based upon the range, it gives you some other demographics. So the smart narrative is actually, helping build, if the visual isn't precise enough, you can actually have it kind of help script the description about what you're trying to tell rather than, creating a text box and putting in a bunch of verbiage. The other thing that should happen is that based on total ticket count of. And so what I can also do is I can extend this narrative to say if there's a value in the model that I want to actually add, I can actually use this as a way to link back to my Q&A feature to say, show total ticket count by org. Remember that one from before? I can actually tie that back to a value that is relevant to that specific role. So again, this is all tied together. So notice that I filtered on, administrators for the UK for the average amount. I can actually, add that value into that view, and it'll actually will populate that value for me without actually having to search for it. And so I can leverage these items that are underlined. I think if I hover over them, you can actually see what it's actually generating. So this number is based upon a question that the model asked around what's my max original score by company. And so I can use this to kind of interrogate what's being generated. And I can kind of build similar questions. And the nice thing is that if I like some of these questions, I can actually save these questions to be used for further visualizations. And then it kind of help, this is where the visuals kind of support each other to support the further analysis. So hopefully that you can kind of see the closed loop on this. This is kind of a pretty, what I consider powerful but insightful type tool that you'll have to play around with to ensure that whatever you provide in this smart narrative doesn't, contradict or redirect what the analysis you're trying to tell within this specific story, whether you're using bookmarks or other types of features to illustrate. All right. So on that note, pretty much everything that I've shown here, we can get access to, through public resources. Definitely encourage everybody to leverage Power BI if you haven't already. Check it out to do some of this advanced analysis. And then the data set that I showed actually is in this lab. I don't know how much longer this will be out there in GitHub. And there's some other examples about, some advanced, visuals related to mapping and charting. There's a whole scenario around motels and hotels that's kind of interesting. And, prices for housing in certain demographics that's key. As far as other resources to kind of keep up with what's happening out there, tells you the evolution of Power BI is pretty consistent. I can show you this roadmap link, which is released relatively soon. If you go and click on the link for the roadmap, you'll kind of get redirected to this view around updates and posts. I follow the blog a lot. If you're working with Power BI and you have registered for the blog, I strongly recommend that you actually do that to kind of see what's happening. Some pretty big updates that are happening this month. January was kind of like a break time for Microsoft, but there's going to be some significant events for new releases that are happening on an annual and biannual and quarterly basis that you should keep up with. And then one of those is actually the Microsoft Ignite event. If you haven't actually signed up for the virtual event, yeah, it is free. It actually gives you some perspective about what's coming out within not just Microsoft in general, but also within the Power Platform solution. It's coming up really soon. I don't think there's a cap on registration like other events. If you've never been to Ignite and you want to experience it for the first time, definitely suggest you do it. Now's a great time to go out there. There's going to be probably thousands of speakers and just as many sessions on various topics. So even if you're not into Power BI, but other Microsoft technologies, check it out and kind of see what's happening out there. And as a final plug, there is actually more ways. I know this was just a quick tour of some of the specific, content, but Microsoft does offer virtual trainings around developing dashboards from end to end that I'm open to hosting with coordination with Adam and others to kind of get your hands on specific solutions within Power BI. Some of these sessions are hosted by other Microsoft partners, some of them by Microsoft Value Professionals, MVPs. Definitely check out this content if you're just getting into Power BI because it gives you an end-to-end approach, a little bit different than the example I gave you, but can give you a quick head start on how to leverage this type of capability for your organization today. And if you have any questions about it, or if we want to organize something for this community to do at some point in the future, be happy to do that as well. All right. So on that note, I want to take a break. Hopefully there's people still listening to me. Any questions?
I'm still with you, Dan.
Okay, I appreciate at least somebody's there.
So can a Power BI graphic be embedded into a different application so it seems seamless to the other application?
So I'm sorry, say again.
Is it possible to embed a Power BI graphic? Say you're doing a map overlay and put that into another application like a custom developed program so that it appears just seamless in that application, rather than having to go out to Power BI separately.
I gotcha. So you're trying to look for potentially ways to kind of embed Power BI within your own system or solution.
Right.
Yeah, let me see if I can share some of that with you. So if you look at the developer, I'll kind of direct you to the kind of the developer solutions within Power BI. Used to be called like dev.powerbi.com. All right, so I don't know if you can see this view I kind of reshared. You can actually kind of do, remember I talked about the extensibility about building your own visuals and do some automation and things, but there's this whole section here around Power BI embedded. So where if you build a report like the bar charts and decomposition trees and things like that we talked about.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah.
should we be seeing something other than the meeting topic?
Oh, shoot. Sorry. One more click. I apologize. All right. Do you see the embedded playground?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So what I did is I went to, it's just dev.powerbi.com, which will redirect to this link. And then I clicked on this embedded playground and it launched this. And so what this gives you is the ability to actually take existing examples of reports and items and actually see, you know, what is the approach to actually produce these solutions and reference them within your own application. So if you got something, say a SharePoint site internally, or your own, you know, say .NET or JavaScript website, or even, you know, like even Azure or AWS, you know, solutions, this is how you would do it. So you can take down, you know, some of these notes and actually kind of see, you know, what are the different types of ways you can actually show this. And so if I actually interact, I should get a chance to actually render this so you can kind of see how this works. So it's kind of like a containered approach. So you can see it from a desktop or mobile standpoint. And for some reason, it is not. It's not rendering properly. So let's see. Think. It usually renders down here for me. Oh, may help if I just click run. There it goes. All right, so this is kind of what an embedded solution would look like. So imagine if you would your own website in a browser and a report that you built in desktop that you published, and this is what's embedded within that solution. And so I have that level of interaction where I can do, you know, Q&A features like you saw before. I can actually do dynamic filtering. Again, we can explore more on this if you want, either in a future session or others. And so this is kind of the interactive experience that you would get for an embedded report within a specific site. And what you're doing is you're leveraging Power BI, not as an end user tool, but as a service. You know, it's really a platform once you kind of get into it. And there's configurations in Azure, and there's security, there's all kinds of that kind of stuff you have to sort through, but it's not horrible. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and there's actually a gallery. for some other examples, there's a huge community. Again, Power BI, kind of like the past chapter has a data storage gallery for different things. And so if you kind of need some inspirations on what are other people doing, I think, has anybody seen some of the, I hate to bring it up, but it's kind of a popular thing. There's like a whole like COVID analysis and Power BI trend going on out there. You can actually see whether people are using to build specific reports. You can actually leverage that, not just for your own exploration, but you can kind of see what the experience will look like from an end user perspective. And so what somebody did was they created a report and they published it in an embedded service to allow for other people to actually do interactive analysis on, just like any other report. Does that make sense? So yeah, I can include this link in content if you want to connect and talk about it further. So I'm actually working with a customer right now and doing some of this in combination with some report production, just to kind of say for customers, say you want to provide. I know banking and financial services is big up there, but imagine if you would, having a banking account with Citi and you want to go look at portfolio and you want your portfolio analysis to be a Power BI report, you could absolutely do that through an app, through a website, through pretty much any device that you want to.
Hey, Dan, just on a slightly different topic.
Sure.
I'm glad toward the end there you kind of pointed out their roadmap, but I was actually using an older version of Power BI Desktop, so that whole insert menu item wasn't even there. So some of that stuff that you're doing, are they adding lots of features still, or is it a pretty stable right now?
So the roadmap is constantly being updated, and they do it on an annual and biannual and quarterly basis. And I was trying to find, there's actually a good friend of mine that actually is doing some of these, the tracking of the different updates. I kind of challenge the term about stable. I mean, Power BI has been out now for a little over 5 years. It's just that the feature enhancements are continually coming out and changing. And so what you're probably are noticing is that you're seeing, monthly desktop updates, weekly updates to the service for adding, say, new data connections, new visualizations, new feature enhancements. I would argue that it's not bug fixes in as much as it is new capabilities. So I would definitely go out to the Microsoft Docs platform, and if I can find it right, Power Platform. Yeah, roadmap. There it is. And so they just released the one that's coming up for Ignite, and this one should give you kind of what new functionality is coming out over the next 3 to 6 months. And a lot of that is integrating, like I said, new data sources, new capabilities.
Yeah, and I was probably talking specifically about the desktop, because I'm guessing not all the features in the desktop are vice versa in the web-based are in the desktop.
Yeah. So it's a great question. So what I was using, if you want to go to your desktop tool, if you go to option, well, there's a couple places you can get there, but I guess the easiest way, if you just go to help and about, you'll see, there's I'm still in December release. They skipped January, so February probably this week there'll be another drop for February. So they're pretty consistent. If you're familiar with Windows Update Tuesdays, like today.
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, in an organization, you don't get that opportunity to update quite that frequently. So yeah, I can on my own personal one, but Yeah, not in an organization. So that's kind of where I was going. And I think you answered it right. It's more new features versus bug fixes, so to speak, which is consistent with a lot of their other products now.
Yeah, I would definitely defend your position. You know, in the first 2 years, it was rough. And so it was, you know, probably a toss up of both. But lately, the enhancements have been, you know, really instrumental. I would say the biggest updates coming up right now are around Azure Synapse, which if you haven't heard about it, you should. Really is somewhat of a game changer, especially if you're looking at, you know, other solutions like, you know, Databricks or Snowflake or whatever, but within the Microsoft ecosystem for self-service analysis. Those are things, and then a lot more support for direct query, you know, so live connections to data for first-class Microsoft data sets like SQL and analysis services. A lot of additional security updates tied to roll-up security. I'll include a link to as a follow-up to the roadmap, and then also if you know Alex Powers, he has a great visual that tracks kind of the updates as they come in waves. I think September was the last big peak, and then March will be the next big peak coming up soon. So great questions. Anything else I can help with? Was this slightly amusing for a Tuesday afternoon in February?
It was very interesting. Thank you.
I know it's a lot if you're not getting into it. So, you know, definitely please take the time to connect with me on LinkedIn if you hadn't already. Again, do appreciate your continued interest and support in the communities. I've been a community founder and advocate now for nearly 12 years, and I really, you know, understand what a lot of folks are going through right now. So staying connected is really important. So, you know, take the chance to provide input and feedback to folks. There we go. Hey, Joe. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. Let us know what we can do to help support you kind of in this new path, because I know the typical community structure has changed a lot, and a lot of people are trying to find new footing. And if you have ideas, if you want to contribute, I know, you know, as a leader and supporter, we're always looking for presenters. We're always looking for people to help drive the groups, you know, step up. There are things that aren't being covered, you know, feel free to volunteer those as well. If you're looking for an opportunity to kind of voice an idea or opinion in a non-judgmental format, you know, aka outside of work and stuff like that, this is great. If you want to polish your public speaking skills, this is great as well. Hopefully everybody understands we're all friends here, so let us know how we can support you. All right. If nothing else,
Yeah, if there's
Oh,
no
go
other
ahead.
questions, yeah, we can go ahead and call it.